Hi accounting class. In this video, I'm going to go over how to complete closing entries. So what I'd like for you to do is go to Blackboard and print out this trial balance for Hoy Corporation. Before we begin, what are closing entries? Closing entries are completed at the last step of the accounting cycle. So up to this point, you know how to complete journal entries, you know how to complete adjusting entries, you know how to post. Now we're going to go over closing entries. So the same way that I taught you debit and credit, where I taught you only know the increase side, because when you know the increase side, you always know the normal balance, and the other side will always be the opposite. I'm also going to teach you an easy way to remember temporary accounts. Temporary accounts are going to be known by this red eye. So someone has a red eye. The R will stand for revenue. The E will stand for expenses. The D will stand for dividends, and the I will stand for income summary. Only know the temporary accounts. So those are the temporary accounts. Revenue, expenses, dividends, and income summary will only be used when you close revenue and expenses. It is only used in the closing process. If it's not temporary, it is permanent. Okay, so any account in assets will be permanent, any account in liabilities will be permanent. For equity, most accounts except for the temporary account called dividends will be the temporary account. Anything else will be permanent. All right, so I started the problem so that the video's not too slow or boring. All right, so we're going to first go over your first closing entry. Everybody look on the board. We're first going to close revenue. So here's your first closing entry. Look what you're doing. You're working right from the trial balance. You take that revenue account and you're debiting it. You're doing the opposite because you want to close that account to zero. $1,405,260. Your credit will be to income summary, $1,405,260. On the bottom of your paper, I want you to do a T account for income summary. So everybody knows the left is always the debit, the right is always the credit. Income summary is only used when you close. So when I teach in class, students will say, Professor Clay, what's the normal balance? It doesn't have one. It will only be used when you close. You will notice that you will totally wipe out this entire account. It will have a zero balance by the time we're done. All right, but right now, when we closed revenue, I credited this account $1,405,260. Now let's look at our second closing entry. Notice I haven't put in the debit yet. We're going to close all our expenses. We're going to go in order. So cost of goods sold, I made my life easy. I just called it COGS, $620,000. I'm going to credit. Salaries expense, credit $3,200. Utilities expense, credit $2,560. Depreciation expense, credit $50,000. Interest expense, credit $30,000. Insurance expense, credit $25,000. You're going to add these all up. When you add them all up, they're going to total $730,760. Okay? That's your second closing entry. You're now closing your expenses. Okay, you're going to go over here. You're going to work with your T. You're going to put a debit of $730,760. The difference between your revenue and expenses, you all know, is your net income. It will also be the difference between your income summary and your expenses, and that total is $674,500. I'm going to circle that. That's your net income. But it's also your third closing entry, because what you're going to do is wipe out this income summary account to zero. So I go over here and I'm going to debit my income summary, $674,500. And now I'm closing my net income to retained earnings, $674,500. So that's your third closing entry. Now we're done with the income summary account. Our fourth closing entry, we're going to close dividends. We just work again from this trial balance for Hoy Corporation. We find the dividends account, which is $2,300, and we're going to debit retained earnings $2,300. We credit dividends $2,300. That's it. That's how you complete closing entries. Remember, if it's not temporary, it's permanent. You only close temporary accounts. Okay, I'll see you soon. Get that homework done in the lab.